Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Fatima Rodriguez, and I'm the Communications and Recruitment Coordinator here at InterExchange. And I'm joined by my colleague, Tammin Nicholson. Tammin, I'll let you introduce yourself as we kick off this presentation.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tammin Nicholson. I'm the Program Manager for the Career Training USA program at InterExchange, and I'm excited to present today about networking and how to develop a mentor-mentee relationship.
Great. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with InterExchange, we are a cultural exchange organization based in New York City, and our mission is to enable global experiences by assisting students and young professionals from overseas to partake in cultural exchange programs here in the United States. And we also help US students and young professionals to experience programs in other countries as well. But within InterExchange, the Career Training USA program works with those seeking to undertake internships and traineeships here in the US. So for that reason today, we are going to discuss networking and developing a mentor and mentee relationship. And as we routinely hear anecdotes from participants who tell us how vital these relationships are for finding an internship, international internship, we thought we would share with you some of these tips today. So understandably, international travel and related experiences have been inhibited by the pandemic, but we do know that there is a great demand for international programs when it is safe to resume travel again. And many prospective interns are using this time to develop their network and identify people who might be excellent resources for future career opportunities. And we want to provide you with some tips and guidance for developing these types of contacts. And I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to Tammin to begin the presentation. Right now, everyone is muted. So if you have any questions, just please type it into the chat box and we'll read them off as they come in if they're pertaining to that portion of the presentation. But we do have questions and we do have a questions and answer aspect at the end of the presentation. So if there's something that you'd like to ask that isn't related at the time of the presentation or that section of the presentation, we can talk about those questions later. Also, if just another quick note, if you join us a little late or you have to leave early, this session is recorded. So anyone who is registered will get a recording of this session. And with that, I'll turn this over to Tammin to get this presentation started.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll get started by going through the outline of today's session. We're going to begin today's webinar by discussing the attributes of a mentor and a mentee relationship. We'll talk about what they are, what they aren't, why this type of relationship is important for finding internships and career prospects. Then we'll dive into some specific tips on how to find mentors, and we'll talk about some key components of this process, specifically networking and informational interviews. And we'll specifically focus on these areas because they are crucial elements to potentially attaining mentorships, to growing your network, and in general to developing professionally. We'll also highlight some specific tips you can use to find mentors and some miscellaneous tips that might prove useful depending on your situation, your industry, and what resources are available to you. We'll move on to also what not to do to find a mentor. I think that's a really important thing just to mention as we talk about finding mentorships. There's some things you definitely don't want to do. So we'll have a question and answer at the end. And just to reiterate what Fatima said, if you need us to repeat or if you have any questions mid-presentation, please don't hesitate to type anything into the chat box and we'll address those as they come in. Okay, so let's chat about mentors. What is a mentor? A mentor is a guide, a coach, an advisor, a cheerleader, a navigator, a role model, all rolled into one. They're someone who will help you to maneuver around challenging situations that you might encounter and provide resources to better your career advancement and to learn new skills. A mentor will help you to find pathways to accumulate important skills and experience and also point you in the right direction to advance yourself professionally. For this reason, a mentor is usually someone in the same industry as you so that they kind of know what you're going through and they know what that path forward might be. They might be one or multiple levels ahead of you. We'll talk a little bit more about the variances in the next few slides, but a key component of a mentor is someone that can understand your experience and understand where you're hoping to get to in the future. Mentors help mentees shape their experiences and their ambitions and their plans. They're qualified to serve in this capacity because they have that relevant general expertise and the professional knowledge that you as a mentee would be looking to learn or looking to gain. So it isn't necessary that mentors need to work at the same company as you. They just have to have that related insight that you're hoping to accumulate. On the flip side, let's talk about what a mentor isn't. So a few things that a mentor isn't. Your boss is not a mentor by design. They were hired to help your company to primarily help the company, not to help you. So you'll certainly learn from your boss. They might turn out to be an excellent role model or some or many of the attributes on the last slide, but they may even become a mentor somewhere down the line. But just remember that's not their primary function. I know a lot of people that have had former bosses turn into mentors after they stopped directly reporting to that person, because once that formal work relationship ended, they could be a little bit more open about work challenges, about work frustrations, potential new opportunities in ways that they couldn't when this person is their direct supervisor. That being said, you could certainly have a mentor within your organization, but again, be wise about expressing any frustrations in relation to the workplace if your mentor is someone in the same organization as you. A mentor is also not your therapist. You want to be really, really clear about separating professional and personal items that you like to discuss. Your mentor is someone who can help you, again, to grow professionally, but they're not there for you to unload all of your frustrations, personal or professional. Every mentor-mentee relationship is a little bit different, but keep in mind the goals of the mentorship you're seeking. What are those specific goals, and do your best to make sure that you're focused solely on those goals and not any other general frustrations that you might want to discuss or talk about. A mentor also isn't a sponsor. And when I say this, I don't mean a visa sponsor like InterExchange. I mean a workplace sponsor. So a mentor will answer questions and offer advice, while a sponsor is typically an executive within the organization that would use their connections to advocate for a younger or less experienced protege within the organization and actively participate in that person's career growth. Your mentor isn't always going to be able to advocate for you, especially if they're not even within your organization. They're there to help you and provide the tools for you to do that on your own. And lastly, and this is important, a mentor isn't just one person. You can have and you should have multiple mentors, maybe one to help you with particular hard skills, another to provide advice on communication or management techniques, maybe a third that can share advice for navigating difficult corporate environments or different corporate situations. The whole presentation will talk about a mentor in the singular form, but I think it's crucial to note now that you should and you can and should have multiple mentors to turn to for guidance when needed. So how can a mentor help you? So first, a mentor can provide advice, and this might be just general career advice, or in a prolonged setting, they can help you to work on hard skills needed for professional development. So we talked a few weeks ago back in the skills session about what those hard skills might be, and a mentor can help you to focus on what the appropriate hard skills would be in your specific industry. So should you focus on blockchain? Should you focus on sales? What's going to be the most relevant professional development that you'll need to advance in your career? But there are also soft skills a mentor can help with that might be crucial for personal development and for you to grow as an employee and a future leader. A mentor can help you take stock in the skills that you currently have and also what you need to work on. They can give honest feedback about your strengths and areas for improvement while identifying opportunities and also resources that will help you to build some of those key skills that'll be important to your career growth. Mentors can also help you with specific career advancement opportunities. They can help you as you're seeking and applying for new positions and provide feedback and advice for your cover letter, your interview style, things of that nature. They can provide support during the hiring process by helping you to practice difficult interview questions, to develop an elevator pitch, to maybe even help you negotiate salary once you are offered a position. They can also help you when you're seeking to advance your career by suggesting stepping stone positions, ideas for maximizing your presence within your organization, and even some certifications that you might want to seek out that will help you to advance your career. Mentors can help you to also find a place within your community by introducing you to relevant interest groups, to networking meetings, maybe key contacts, listservs, other training opportunities, basically any person or opportunity who could help you to expand your network and to build your brand. I think of it as like going to a party. If you only know one person, it could be a really daunting experience, but if that one person that you do know is familiar with the environment and can introduce you to others, they can point you in the direction of the food, the coat closet, it makes that experience a lot easier. So having that introduction to a wider network or a wider industry is really vital. And lastly, your mentor can be a reliable source for a letter of recommendation. This can be extremely valuable, especially if your mentor is well known and respected in the field. So I want to spend a little bit of time on a typical mentor relationship. I would just add the caveat here that there are many forms of mentor relationships. So everything I'll say here is maybe typical, but there are certainly variations. Most commonly, a mentor relationship is a one-on-one relationship between the mentor and the mentee. The mentoring is designed around some mutually defined aspect that the mentee is seeking to refine or to develop. That being said, there are definitely alternate forms of mentoring, including group mentorships where you don't meet one-on-one, maybe peer-designed mentorship groups, but typically it's a one-on-one guidance session. Most people also wind up having long-term relationships with their mentor. The person is always going to be a few steps ahead of you, whether in their career or within whatever skill you're working on, so they can guide you through various aspects as you learn more. They'll be able to help you further and further advance. However, some mentoring is done in just bite-sized chunks. For instance, you might find someone with a specific skill or experience that you want to learn more over a long period of time. So you're focusing on defining your time management or your organizational skills, and that's specifically all you're working on, even though it's a longer term relationship. There are also instances where someone might agree to simply provide some mentoring in a one-time, maybe 1-hour mentoring session. Personally, I returned to the US after a few years overseas, and someone who had done the same experience as me offered a couple hours to review my resume and to coach me a little bit about how I could describe my time and my work overseas as I prepared to re-enter the US job market and prepared to interview. So while long-term mentorship is common, that's certainly a variation of a short-term mentorship for a short specific aspect and attribute that I was hoping to attain. Mentorship is also a two-way relationship. So as the mentee, you're probably not sharing as much as you're receiving, but you might find some relevant information, some insight, even a job opening that could be useful to your mentor. So it's important to always consider, what could you bring to the table? What are some of the offerings you could exchange with your mentor? How can you help them and make this a mutually beneficial relationship? Most mentor relationships are also naturally occurring, so it's something that's just going to develop naturally, usually by asking someone that you know or that you have some type of relationship. There are certainly paid coaches and professional mentor services out there, and it's up to you to decide which makes the most sense in your situation. But most of these mentor relationships that we see and the interns that apply to the program who we talk to mention that the mentors and the people that have given them advice are someone that they've known for a longer period of time. In a professional sense, a mentor must also exhibit the attributes that are necessary for you to succeed in your industry or your field. So the purpose of a mentor is typically to provide guidance to someone maybe a few rungs or years below them in a certain area. They can be within your organization. Some organizations even have formal mentoring programs where they're specifically set up by the HR department, but also junior workplace members can be mentors, peers can be mentors. Mentorship is all about passing along knowledge. So whether it's lateral, up or down, anyone can be a mentor and anyone can have a mentor. A senior executive might need mentorship from a junior employee to navigate a new technology or a new form of social media communication or something of that nature. With that, I want to zoom in a little bit on informal mentorship as well. So there's two different types of mentorship. So some mentorship programs are really formally constructed, maybe perhaps within an industry or a group or an organization. But many times mentorships are more informal. Maybe a former professor that you keep in contact with will allow you to connect with them every so often about important advisory topics. These are important relationships, as well as there's a lot of value in having someone you can turn to for advice, even if they don't have that official mentor title. So by definition, an informal mentorship has a little bit less structure and is mostly based upon the chemistry between the two people that are involved in the mentoring relationship. Informal mentoring is much more flexible than formal mentoring. There may or may not be specific goals present. It could be on an ad hoc basis. Perhaps maybe the mentee only reaches out anytime that they hit a block. These mentorships can also be much shorter than a longer formal mentorship. In fact, informal mentoring relationships may only last 1 or 2 sessions, like in my interview example. That was definitely an example of an informal mentorship that was offered to me. In these instances, the mentee is looking for specific information or help and reaches out to that short-term informal mentor. With informal mentorship, the expertise of the mentor could also vary because you're drawing upon your closest contacts. So there might be a limitation to the knowledge and experience within your closest contacts. Informal mentorship can also have less of a transactional feeling because they aren't built upon measuring the skills and success and the metrics of the mentee the same way that a formal mentorship might be. So as you can see, there's many different variations to mentorship. So before we move into the bulk of this presentation and the steps to how to find a mentor, I want to pause and discuss some key points for successful mentees. You can kind of use this as a general outline as you think about this presentation, as you seek mentors. As a mentee, the first key is to define your goals. So why do you want a mentor? Next, evaluate who in your network can help you. Who's going to be able to serve as a mentor or connect you to potential mentors? Who can make that introduction? Who can help you to advance whatever you've decided is your goal? Next, make a clear ask. What and why do you want this person to help you? And it's okay to have multiple mentors as well too. If you have multiple things that you're working on, it's okay to have multiple mentors. Be eager and proactive. Build skills in between meetings with your mentor. Schedule follow-up items. Make sure that you're bringing an agenda to any mentorship meeting. And stay open to any feedback that they offer and put in place their suggestions. It's important to also remain humble. At any age, like I said, anyone can have a mentor who can advise them and help them to be more successful. So we're going to move into how to find a mentor next, but I do want to pause here, just given that introduction for any questions that may have come in so far.
Yes, so there are 2 questions. The first question is, what questions should I ask a mentor if I don't know what skills I need developing?
So if you're not sure what skills you want to develop, I think you should ask your mentor, for an evaluation and for an assessment of what they think you should be working on or you could be working on based on what they know about you. If it's someone that maybe doesn't really know your work quite well yet, I think it's okay to ask them some questions about their own path. So what mistakes have they made, or what do they wish they knew when they were in your shoes or their position? So there's 2 ways you can go about it. I would start by focusing on the specifics and asking them for that advice and feedback. But if you don't think that they would know that, you can maybe focus more on the role model aspect and the things that they would have done differently, or the things that have helped them to get where they are.
Awesome, thank you. And the second question that we have is, can I have multiple mentors assist on the same skill?
That's a good question. So I would definitely advocate for multiple mentors, but you don't want to get to a position where you're getting different advice or you're getting redundant advice. So it's okay if they overlap, but if you're really seeking to improve your time management skills, I don't think that it makes sense to have multiple people helping you to achieve that one skill. I would focus more on one mentor per item that you're working on, just to make it easy on yourself so that you're not pitting them against each other or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers, Tammin.
No problem. So if we have no other questions, let's move into how to find a mentor. So we'll go through 4 fairly straightforward but pretty involved steps, and we'll take a couple of detours as we go through each of those steps. Finding a mentor isn't an overnight process. It's going to take some time, some effort, and some energy. So there's a lot of information packed into these 4 steps. But the first step is networking. So having a strong network is very important in the early stages of finding a mentor. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this aspect of the process. As you begin to find a mentor, you'll need to identify what you hope to gain from a potential mentor. So kind of going back to that last question, your own needs assessment. What do you want to emulate? Or who do you want to emulate? What skills do they have that you'd like to gain? Why? And I think you can start big. This doesn't even have to be realistic at the onset. Just to give you a bit of a context of what you're looking to achieve and obtain. Make your learning known to people. What are you currently working on? What projects do you hope to get into? I would start pretty broad as you're identifying the mentor traits that you're hoping to gain. And then from there, you can start to draw it in. So who in your network has these attributes? Who can help you get to where you want to be? Think critically. Is there an executive in your organization who is many career steps ahead of you? Is there someone who's only a few steps ahead of you? And would either or both be potential mentors? Maybe you know someone who's doing an internship in the United States right now, and maybe they could be a mentor. Think about whether you're part of any interest groups with people who might be able to provide some skills-based mentorship for you. Think about people who share the same interests and passions as you. At this stage, you're drawing in those traits a little bit more, and you're trying to be a little bit more realistic about your dream mentor. I think that probably every burgeoning entrepreneur would want Richard Branson as a mentor, but at this stage, you want to be realistic about the people who you have connections to and would be able to invest in you as a mentee. So it's also important as you're thinking about that more realistic aspect that you understand the strengths and weaknesses of any potential mentor that you reach out to as much as you can at this point. Mentors are not superhuman. They're going to have flaws, so make sure that you understand their strengths and their weaknesses. And the latter might not be as apparent if you don't know that mentor as well, but if they're a really busy person and they have trouble keeping appointments, that's a weakness that might not work well in a mentor relationship if you're hoping to have a certain amount of attention and screen time with them. You can also explore mentors outside of your network. I think the internet is a great equalizer for anyone who is connected. Potential mentors can be found via blogs, LinkedIn, professional writing. You can connect with these people and be active in your comments and collaboration to learn more about what's going to work with them, what's their communication style, how can you draw in that relationship a little bit more. There's also formal mentorship programs available in some organizations, some universities that will match recent graduates with further on career, people who are further on in their career. This is another great way to get set up with someone who's outside your network who might have excellent skills and insight to offer. Another important consideration is an identity-based mentor. So people who have maybe faced the same pathways or face the same obstacles as you due to similar character traits, someone who's maybe thrived as a minority in their workplace or been able to balance a career and children. That could be someone, again, inside your network or outside your network. I would just say for anyone that you do reach out to outside of your network, you want to be careful about cold asks. You want to have some rapport with the person who could be your mentor, just again, so you know a little bit more about what's going to work and what isn't going to work in that type of relationship. So let's pause here and let's just dive deeper into networking. We talked a lot about it on the last slide. I've mentioned it a lot so far in this presentation. Networking is forming relationships with people in your field or forming relationships with people who are doing similar things to you. It's the process of connecting and building any relationship that you form that's going to help you to maintain professional contacts. So the contacts in your network are going to open the door to learning about how to advance your career path or even finding a new career path. networking gives you the opportunity to also develop your brand. So as you meet people and you expand your network, people are simultaneously meeting you. They're learning about your knowledge, your skills, your ability, and they're folding you into their own context. So that's something to keep in mind. Networking is certainly a two-way street. It's an exchange with other people. You're not simply accumulating contacts. So you need to remember to focus on what you would bring to the table as you grow your network. Think about how you'd be perceived and how you can also help or interest new people who are in your network. What's that value added that you can help them with? Not so much, oh, well, what can I get from this new person that I'm meeting at a conference or meeting at a presentation? As an aside, I think if you're new to the field of work, that last bit might seem challenging. What value added could you offer an executive? But I think there's a lot of room for latitude on this point. Your value added might be just simply a new perspective or some fresh excitement to the field. It could be a common interest or the fact that you're a great conversationalist and the person enjoys talking with you in between conference sessions. So value added is much more than just getting a new position or getting a new client. There's a lot to what your value added could be. So I want to provide some specific resources about how and where you should start to build your network if you haven't already. And I think the good news is for everyone on this call, you already have a network. Your friends, your family, your coworkers, your schoolmates, all these people are contacts that you already have and who know you well and can vouch for you. A specific place that is abundant with ways to build your network is your university. Your professors are important liaisons who can introduce you to many opportunities, people, potential career paths. So make sure that while you're in school and you have their attention, you're making the most of it. Additionally, many schools have visiting researchers or lecturers who might come to campus from time to time. Don't be shy to make sure that you're introducing yourself and making contacts with these visitors, as they might not be on campus for a long period of time. We've had a number of students tell us that they found their international internship just by connecting with a visiting professor or a guest lecturer who was on their campus for a couple weeks or maybe just one semester, and they were able to use that person as a network to learn more about internships in the US and potential career opportunities overseas. Your Career Center is another important place to start building networks. They can help you by keeping you informed of various events like career and employer recruitment days where businesses might be on campus. And you can be proactive and you can start to reach out and do research prior to these visits so that you're prepared to ask that great question to make an employer remember you specifically or engage with you further after their visit. Other universities also have societies and leadership organizations that are other excellent ways to help build your campus and even your alumni network as well. Another good route to building networks are conferences. So attending sessions, presenting, asking insightful questions are all great ways to get noticed in your field. Many conferences also have built-in social time to make sure that people do meet and do exchange ideas and information. And definitely attend any of these networking events. If there's an opening reception or coffee breaks or happy hours, outside of the formal network, you could also visit exhibition halls and where you can meet some exhibitors and learn more about who they are, what they do, assuming they aren't already engaged with customers at that time. And some conferences even have career centers where you can schedule a drop-in session and get some feedback and tips for breaking into the field. I think conferences right now at the moment, a lot are on hold, but most have moved to virtual settings too. And all of these options, exhibition halls, networking options, some of the things that I'm mentioning have also moved virtually and are also online in the conferences that I've attended over the last few months. You can also network at your current job. And this type of networking can be done pretty simply by just learning about the interests and roles of coworkers who you don't interact with on a daily basis due to the function of your position. You can also do this by actively volunteering for committees or projects where you get to work with people outside of your department or your current area. And another avenue to do networking without even leaving your desk sometimes is to connect more with clients and learn more about your vendors and who these people are, what they do, how they got into their position, kind of what role they took to get to where they are, because a lot of what you do is going to overlap even if they're not necessarily doing the exact same role as you every single day. We also talked extensively about LinkedIn and utilizing your LinkedIn profile a few weeks ago, but virtual networking is more crucial now than ever. Online engagement with people, it helps to grow your network, even if you can't physically interact, if you can't physically go to a conference or meet someone at a recruiting event. You can develop serious connections with people online from other parts of the world that you're not able to collaborate with in person due to geographic distance or right now due to the pandemic. But this doesn't have to impede your ability to collaborate and to also grow your network. So my guess is by now that many of you kind of on this call, you know why networking is important, but I want to drive home this point and highlight some of the advantages of developing your network outside of simply finding a mentor. First, networking increases your exposure and it builds your personal brand as more people know you, what skills you have, what passions you have, what attributes you bring to the table. Increased exposure also makes it more likely that you'll gain professional development opportunities, perhaps a fellowship or a scholarship or an apprentice position. You'll be referred to these opportunities by who's already in your network, maybe even internship opportunities in the United States. You might be considered for leadership positions within your company, your field, or even within your university. Basically, the more exposure you have, the more people who are likely to see an opportunity and think, wow, John would be great for this opportunity because, I remember him talking about X, Y, and Z last time we met in person. Networking also helps you to gain firsthand industry advice. Your network is going to be able to share advice and experiences that you won't necessarily learn from a book or from a blog. They can give you advice on how to get your foot in the door after you graduate. We talked just last week in the Finding Internships webinar about the open and hidden market. And networking is crucial to gain access to all the internship positions that are not listed on the open market, but are in that hidden list of internships. And for those of you who weren't able to join last week, the study from Deloitte last year revealed that nearly 80% of jobs were found via networking. So it's a really important tool at everyone's disposal. Just to sum up why network is important, you've probably all heard this quote. It's a little cliche, but I think as you develop in your career paths, you'll find this is certainly true, and that it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know. And the more people you know, the more resources you'll have for finding an internship, for finding a mentorship, letters of recommendation, information about career paths, things of that nature. So tips for finding a mentor include networking, but we also have tips for networking. So tips with inside of tips. And I want to just go through these 9 tips that are solid advice for anyone looking to be a stronger networker. Like many of our advice in many of these sessions, the first step is a self-assessment. Think about what you bring to the table. Is it eagerness, friendliness? Why would someone want to engage with you and get to know you a little bit better? Next, think about who you are seeking. Who do you want to engage with? Who are you looking to add to your network? This webinar is focused on mentorship, so we'll assume that the motivation for most of the audience is finding a mentor, but it doesn't mean that that's the only type of networking connection that's out there. You could connect with potential clients, competitors, vendors. Again, not every relationship needs to be transactional, but in most cases, you grow your network from a common interest or from a personality match. So oftentimes you'll find people in your field that match both of the one or both of those attributes. Either way, no one wants to build a relationship with someone that they don't like. The fourth tip is to practice your elevator pitch. Who you are, what excites you, and things of that nature. I used to have a colleague who would ask people at conferences, so, what's your story? I don't think many people would phrase it that directly, but that's pretty much what people are learning as they network with you. Think about what your elevator pitch might be in a networking situation. I wouldn't say that you need to rehearse it, but make sure you can easily tick off the important things you want people to know and remember about you. Fifth, be prepared to listen to others. Remember that networking is an exchange. Everyone thinks that they're super interesting and have great things to share, and the more you listen to others, the more they're going to remember that, oh, they really listened to me and they were interested about my background, about what I've done. So just by letting them talk about themselves for a little bit, you'll be remembered more favorably. In that same vein, be generous with your time and attention. If you go to a campus lecture and find out that the person who's presenting has nothing to offer you as far as job advice or career prospects, that doesn't mean that you would stand up and storm out in the middle of the presentation. You'd still remain attentive, thank them for their time, keep in touch, even passively if it's on LinkedIn. You never know how that relationship might help you in the future. It's important to remember that, until you actually establish a relationship with a person, it's difficult to work out, what you might be able to provide to each other. So it's difficult to establish a relationship with someone unless you listen to them and find out about their passions and about what they do. So this sometimes means taking a little bit of time in the early stages of the relationship and risking that time might be quote unquote wasted because it doesn't lead anywhere professionally at the moment. Tips 7 and 8, I think, go hand in hand. First, take risks, introduce yourself to people that you think might not have time for you in person, via email. Make sure that you come across as professional. You never know how that person might respond. Chances are they've been in your shoes and will empathize a little bit and share their time and knowledge. Also, go outside of your comfort zone. For some people, this is the same thing as approaching someone that they don't know and striking up a conversation. But for others, it might be putting themselves in that situation, just in a network situation to begin with. Maybe something that's built into a conference that they typically wouldn't feel comfortable attending. Some people are natural networkers. They're more socially at ease with people they don't know and welcome the opportunity to build conversations and ask questions of strangers. And then those who are a little bit more introverted, this is one of the soft skills we talked about in January that you'll probably need to spend a little bit of time actively refining and practicing. Number 9 is probably the easiest of these 9 steps, but too many people overlook it. Follow up and keep in touch with the connections that you've made. Send a note, an email, invitation, LinkedIn invite. Just remind that person about the great conversation you had and any follow-up items you want to share, whether it's your resume or something else pertinent that you discussed. All right, so like I said, that networking step is probably one of the biggest steps for finding a mentor. And that's all very important stuff that we had to deviate to kind of get through. But step 2, now that we've talked about networking and now that you've identified potential mentors, now you can reach out to some of them. And this is where informational interviews come into play. You'll most likely initiate your outreach through some type of informational interview. And you don't have to phrase it like that, but you'll reach out to a potential mentor and explain what it is that you'd like to discuss. The tone of your outreach is going to depend on whether you know the person or if you're being introduced by someone else, but either way, the goal of this informational interview is to reach out to ask them for a bit of their time, their information, and try to establish a rapport with them so you can understand what it is that they've done to get to where they are. If you don't hear back, if you get a strong commitment, it's certainly okay to follow up with them as well. Just make sure you're not bombarding them as you're reaching out and asking for an informational interview. So let's go into informational interviews a little bit more before we continue with this step 2. So informational interviews are a type of networking where you network with someone to learn about their professional experience. It's a way for you to leverage your connections and create a more meaningful network in your internship search. The goal of an informational interview is not to get hired, but your goal is instead to grow your network, to gain knowledge about your dream position, maybe even get an early in at the company. Informational interviews are simply a conversation to learn a little bit more and get that inside scoop of what it's like to work in your area of interest. There are a number of ways to initiate an informational interview, but you'll need to demonstrate a little bit of proactivity to get this process started. So you can ask your existing network connections to introduce you to key professionals, but you need to be the one who is identifying who you want to speak to or the type of person that you want to speak to first and why. So for example, you might say, I'm seeking a summer finance internship in New York City. Can you introduce me to someone in your contacts so I can ask them about what it's like to work at company X? Or, do you know of someone who works in banking in New York? Or, can you introduce me to this specific person so I can speak more about what it's like to work in that field? So you're going to need to get that process started. If you're not sure there's anyone in your network who could introduce you or that you could talk to, another option is to start the outreach yourself. And it's totally fine to reach out to someone via email and kind of begin with your elevator pitch. Tell them how you found them, whether it was through an alumni network or mutual friend or a coworker, and be specific about what you want to talk about, not just I want to pick your brain. Ask them about their career paths, about what it's like to work in finance, in New York City, more tangible, specific things that you're asking for in your request. And while this isn't a job interview, you must prepare the same way that you would if it was a job interview. Make a good first impression, exude competency, eagerness, and other important character traits that you want to showcase. Every aspect of how you present yourself before and after needs to reflect the same qualities of a regular interview. So dress professionally as you would for an interview, act on your best behavior, make sure that you're prepared. Don't ask the person you're meeting with basic questions that are going to be in their biography or in their LinkedIn profile. Show that you've put in the effort and you've done a little bit more in-depth research. And if you're afraid that you might not remember all the questions you want to ask, it's also okay to write them down. You're the one who requested the conversation, so you need to be the one who shows up with specific questions and topics to discuss. And I think to that point, prioritize what you'd like to ask. So they can only speak to you for 30 minutes. You want to make sure that you don't use most personal stuff or developing rapport. You want to make sure that you don't come to the end of that 30 minutes and you haven't had the chance to ask what's most important and that you really want to learn from them. And there are also instances where some job offers do come out of informational interviews, but will you hire me is not a good question to ask in this setting. That's another important thing to remember as you're going into a job interview. That's not your goal. Like a traditional interview, you should also send a follow-up note afterwards and thank them for their time. This is all part of building your network, so make sure that you're keeping in touch moving forward. Okay, so with that aside of informational interviews, let's continue on to this step 2 in outreach. So after your informational interview, evaluate the conversation. Was a connection made with this person? What did you learn from this person? Yourself, your goals, what it is you're working towards? Were they encouraging to those aspects, or were they more dismissive? Think about whether this person has a bandwidth to meet with you in the future. Do you want to meet with them again? It's a little bit like a first date. Or better on LinkedIn than they are in real life. But again, even if you don't want to see them again, send that thank you. Make sure you stay in touch. Do all the things to keep them within your network, because you never know how your paths may cross again in the future. And it's also something that I would encourage you to do is to repeat this process multiple times, because there's, again, multiple people that are going to be able to help you in information interviews or could be potential mentors. So it's okay to do this multiple times. It's okay to do this simultaneously and reach out to a couple people at the same time to try and broaden your access to potential mentors. So we've talked about networking, we've talked about outreach. Now let's go on to step 3. This is probably the hardest part. This is when you're going to make the ask. Will you be my mentor? I wouldn't do this in the first meeting, maybe not even the second meeting. Maybe after you've really started to establish a rapport with them, or after a couple of informal conversations. Again, this all depends on how well you hit it off and how much rapport you have built with that person. But in your ask, be specific in what you want mentoring on and articulate why you would like them to be your mentor. For example, I admire your facilitation skills and I have a goal to improve my own skills in that area. Would you be willing to be my mentor as I try and build this goal around facilitation? Also, show that you're serious. What steps are you already taking? Have you enrolled in a facilitation skill building course? Are you actively seeking opportunities to facilitate more in your current position or in university? Demonstrate that this is something that you're working towards with or without their help, and that you aren't solely relying on them to impart this additional knowledge and capacity. I think it's also really important to stop here and address that if they say no, that's okay. You don't have to write them out of your life. You don't have to be embarrassed. This could still, or probably still is, an important connection that you want to maintain, whether just as someone who's in your network, maybe as a colleague, or even just as a role model. It just means that they might not be a good candidate for a mentor at the time. And saying no is much better than saying yes and then not being completely invested in mentoring you. So don't don't be discouraged if someone says no, they don't have the capacity to be your mentor at the moment. So this last step is really important. Step 3 might be the hardest part, but I think step 4 is probably the most important part. Once you have identified a mentor and you've asked and someone's agreed to be your mentor, make a plan. As the person asking for mentorship, you should take care of the logistics. So you should outline what you want to work on, when you want to work on it, how, make agendas for your meetings so that you have something to refer to and can keep the meetings on task. Mentees drive the relationships, so it's on you to make the most out of the time your mentor is giving you. Demonstrate commitment as well by being prepared and asking for specific actionable feedback. Ask for homework or things that you could work on in between some of your meetings or check-ins with your mentor. Prepare to be challenged by them as well and be open in variations on how you might achieve the goals that you've set out. Maybe you're planning to build leadership skills. So in that case, your mentor is going to push you to put yourself in more practical situations, even if your plan is to brush up on leadership through reading about it in books and more theory. They're not always going to have the same vision that you've laid out, and it's important. That's why you're asking for help, and that's why you're asking for a new perspective. Also make it easy on your mentor. Since they're providing extra time in their day to share this advice and guidance, you should be putting in the bulk of the required commitment. To that effect, let the relationship develop organically. If they are a professional mentor, they might not be interested in sharing much about their personal life, and that's okay. They might be more comfortable sticking to the nuts and bolts of the predefined agenda topics. If it's a more informal mentorship that starts to develop, you might have that personal connection that takes up a significant portion of your check-ins and your mentorship plan. But don't try and force the relationship into something that it's not. Whatever interaction you have with your mentor, make sure that you're also showing the value in their feedback and you're appreciative of the investment that they have made in you and in your skills and in your development. Let's stop here and take a look at ways to not find a mentor. I think this is a key component of this presentation as well. First and foremost, don't ask a stranger to be your mentor. If it's someone that you are reaching out to for an informational interview or you're reaching out to online, make yourself not a stranger first. Find ways to connect with them like we talked about in the beginning. Comment on their blogs in positive ways, share updates, start a discussion on LinkedIn, drawing on some of the conversation topics that they've started. Introduce yourself at networking events, referring clients or business to them, depending on what your relationship might be currently. Setting up an informational interview, and the list goes on of ways that you can make yourself not a stranger. But you don't want to reach out to someone that you don't know and just say, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" Because that's most likely not going to result in a yes. And if it does, it's unlikely that you're going to be on the same page as this person if they don't know much about you to begin with. Second, don't try and force a mentorship connection. If they say no, or if they aren't sure, they're probably not going to be a great mentor. You want someone who's going to be all in and someone that you do connect with. So if it doesn't seem like it's going to be a good fit, or if you don't click with that person, or if they don't show interest in the idea, forcing a mentorship is not going to be the most effective way to achieve the goals that you've set out to attain. To that point, make sure your mentor is someone that you genuinely like and admire and want to meet with regularly. You don't want this to be a chore. You want this to be something that remains exciting and something that you look forward to. Close friends and family are also not a good idea for a mentor. You really want someone who's going to be honest with you almost in a clinical way. And you don't want someone who's not going to be truthful or hide what they think you should work on for fear of hurting your feelings or tarnishing an existing relationship that you have or an existing friendship. Lastly, don't expect a mentor to find you. Everyone is busy and few people are going to reach out and say, "Hey, I see you're struggling and I'd like to be your mentor." You're going to have to be proactive if you're looking to find someone who's going to take time to make that investment in mentoring you. With that, we're going to wrap up and do some questions. I see a couple I think have come in, but I do want to highlight some of the last 4 webinars we have coming up in the series. Next week we will talk about interview tips. whether it's remote or in-person interviews, to help you land that dream internship or that dream position in the United States. And then we will have a session on US workplace culture, what it's like to intern in the US. We have a session on English in the US workplace, idioms, business vernacular, things like that. And then towards the end of next month, we will have a panel of alumni who will share their internship experiences and their advice for a successful internship in the United States. So Fatima, do you want to go through some of the questions so far?
Yes, so we have 4 questions. One of the questions we already did touch upon. The question was, do you ask someone to be a mentor, or how should I go to talk to talk to them about it? I don't know if you have any additional tips that you maybe want to touch on in regards to that question, but I think you did a great job about going through the steps of how to find and approach a mentor.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that it doesn't always have to be something that you need to specifically ask. So I think if you want a formal mentor, you need to ask for a formal mentor. But if you have someone that can serve as an informal mentor, maybe that's just where your relationship goes. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for in a mentorship. But if you have someone who you'd like to be your mentor and you'd like to develop a strong plan, I would ask them. But if you have someone who you're okay with going to them every now and then, maybe they're a professor who will serve as a letter of recommendation, then I don't know if you need to ask them. But if they're actionable items, I think you should certainly just ask someone and focus more on like what those actionable items are and how they can help you get there.
Awesome. So the second question is, can professors be mentors?
I kind of answered that just now by
Sorry.
accident. No, that's my own fault for looking at the questions. Yeah, I think professors can be mentors for sure, but I would also say make sure that you're asking a professor for mentoring and not tutoring. I think it can that can sometimes be a little bit of a fine line if you're still in school. If a mentor is helping you with something that's course related and course material, are they really providing mentorship or are they providing tutoring? So just make sure as you're asking professors for mentorship, you're focusing more on those career focused items and not things that are maybe academically based, if that makes sense.
Great, that's actually a great point. And the third question is, how long should an informational interview be?
I think most people would probably do a 30-minute informational interview, maybe an hour. I think it's fine to ask someone as you're setting it up, how much time do you have? How much time can you spare? I think most informational interviews pre-COVID would just be, can we grab a cup of coffee? So in this case, you're probably going to send them a Zoom meeting, given just the nature of the world right now. So it's totally fine to say, do you have time for a 30-minute Zoom meeting or a 30-minute Google Hangout session? I think that would be all part of the logistics that you would need to organize if you're setting up a virtual informational interview.
Awesome. And the last question is, should I send my informational interview questions to the person ahead of time?
I think it's okay to give them an outline of what you'd like to ask. Well, you should give them an outline of what you'd like to ask, but I wouldn't box yourself into specific questions because you might have follow-up questions. It's a good idea to give them an outline of what you'd like to talk about, but I don't think you need to give them all of the specific questions that you'd have um, ahead of time because you do want the conversation to flow naturally, but I think it would be looked upon favorably if you had specific agenda items that you'd like to ask them about. Maybe I saw that you worked in this organization 5 years ago, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what it was like to do that specific job function. But then I also saw that you did an international internship, and I'd like to know how you went about finding that. So you can give them an outline of where your questions might go, but I don't think you need to give them a specific script.
Thank you for that, answering those questions, Tammin. That's all the questions that came in during the Q&A session. So I think we're ready to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I think this is of all of the topics we've done, this is probably the one that's the most it depends. So just remember that all mentorships and all mentor and mentee relationships might take a little bit of a different format and different style. But thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week, or take care.